everyone, this is Paul Gale from paulgalenetwork.com, and thank you for joining me today for video game news. It is October 28th, 2021, and these are the top stories of the day. To kick things off, PlayStation announced PlayStation PC today. This is an effort to bring more PlayStation games to more people around the world, folks that don't necessarily have a PlayStation 4 or a PlayStation 5, specifically the latter, as it's still of short supply and hard to get when it does come out. Sony has in the past brought a few games over to PC. We saw it with Horizon Zero Dawn. We're seeing it again with God of War, the 2018 version that is, and it looks like things will be continuing. Matt Piscatella over on Twitter had the following to say, which is interesting. According to the NPD Group's Player Pulse, only about 1/3 of PC players in the United States owns a PS4, and only 8% own a PS5. Now, once again, that 33% to 8% is a big difference, but that's because PS5 has only been out for a year, still short supply, etc. So that number, I'm sure, will grow eventually. But regardless, that leaves a huge PC audience that can be reached, and is also why releasing ports on PC is not likely to impact content sales on the consoles. Win-win kind of deal. And yeah, that's very true. That's how I believe this to be in favor of, Sony's overall income. They get to sell the PlayStation out there in advance, establish a big market, sign people up for their PSN, PS Plus services, release a number of titles internally across their various studios like Naughty Dog and Insomniac Games, Sony Santa Monica Studios, Bluepoint, and so forth. Have them reach max capacity in sales. Nothing's going to sell one-to-one with 20 million PlayStation 5 owners, 50 million, 80 million PlayStation 5 owners. No game ever does, right? Unless if it's a pack-in and stays a pack-in its entire life. But you're eventually going to reach a point where even a great game, if it comes out year one, year two in the console's life, by the time the console has a much larger install base, year 5 or year 6, that ratio isn't necessarily going to continue with that game selling almost one-to-one or, 1 to every 3 new owners like it maybe did have in its infancy. You have something like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, that's continuously selling well. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, continuously selling well. Although, even Breath of the Wild isn't a one-to-one. In the beginning, it was. In fact, there were more copies of Breath of the Wild selling than Nintendo Switches on the market, which was wild. An incredible stat. But now, Nintendo Switch is at 94 million worldwide. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is not at 94 million worldwide, or as of the last data, 89.5 million worldwide. I expect it to be about 94 now. Breath of the Wild is a 20 million plus seller. You see, it went from almost one-to-one parity to eventually being a quarter of the market that could buy it, buys it. So you reach a point where nobody's buying the games anymore, or not enough are buying the games anymore. So what do? Well, if you're PlayStation in this case, you re-release your game on the PC crowd. These are folks that by now they probably would have purchased a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5, and they clearly have not. But they could be interested in the games. So a game like God of War, a game eventually like Wolverine might be very attractive. But someone who has a $2,000 PC isn't jumping to say, I can't wait to spend another $500, buy a PlayStation 5 just for Wolverine. No. They're going to play what they like. They might really want Wolverine, and that $70 game is no problem for them, but they could wait. They could wait 2 years, 3 years, play everything else that's coming to PC, and eventually, yes, now I'm going to buy Wolverine. That's how I see it. So it really is a win-win. And before we move on to the next topic of the day, we also received today Sony's fiscal year 21 quarter 2 earnings, and PlayStation had some information that's more interesting than others. I will get into what's the most intriguing of the sort. Starting with PlayStation 5. Another 3.3 million units of PS5 were sold in the last quarter, shipped specifically, but more or less sold. 13.4 million is that system's lifetime at this point. The last quarter for PlayStation 4 had 200,000 units shipped and is now at 116.6 million. I do not think that PS4 is going to reach 120 million. It's going around at a snail's pace. Now you might think, well, 200,000 is a lot. But even if it does 400,000, this winter, this fall into winter, that's only going to bring it to 117 million. It's tapering off. It's still selling well for a console that's 8 years old, but I don't think it's going to be able to bust out another 3 million unless if Sony really stretches the legs and, several years from now, you can still find PS4s being manufactured and shipped. So it's possible. But regardless, very successful system. Really quite some high sellers on it. We just talked about how God of War, eclipsed 19 million, and that's significant. And Sony's PS4 definitely a hit. PS5, that's the reason why it seems like it's always out of stock. And who has one? Because when you went from the PlayStation 3 generation of like 87 million to PS4, there weren't as many fans who instantly wanted a PS4. PS3 was a little bit weaker of a console in terms of its performance on the market than PS2 especially, correct? PS5, on the other hand, is at an all-time hype because PS4 had a stronger ecosystem. It literally sold more by 20 million at 116 so far than PS3. So there are more PS4 owners out there hungry for a PS5 than there were PS3 owners hungry for a PS4. So that's why, even though PS5 is doing well, it seems like, well, who has one? So many more people are left without it, But Sony will catch up. Manufacturing will eventually increase, and when shipping is better, when chip manufacturing is better, we'll see Sony come around, and I think PS5 has a good chance at doing 120 or more, but we'll see. 76.4 million units of software for PlayStation, 7.6 million of those first-party games. This is last quarter. Digital full game software ratio is at 62%, which is high. PlayStation Plus subscribers, there are 47.2 million of them. There are 104 million active monthly users across the PlayStation ecosystem. Pretty strong numbers overall. Going next into Prince of Persia talk. We received an update today on Twitter. This is from the Sands of Time remake development team. Hello, Prince of Persia fans. We want to take a moment to reassure you that the development of Prince of Persia, the Sands of Time remake, is still underway, motivated and inspired by your feedback. We will update you on our progress in the future and want to thank all of you for your unwavering support and patience from the dev team. This is one of those things that we saw earlier in the year leak and then officially get revealed by Ubisoft. And yeah, it looked good, but not as good as we would have wanted. A little bit weak if they're trying to do something big with Prince of Persia. When you release a few games on one cartridge or on one disc or on one download and it's full price or close to full price, 3 games or whatever it is, that's all right. When it's one game and the remake visuals are more or less remastered, some improved textures, better frame rate, increased resolution, not really deep diving into it, it could be a hard sell. If the game had a giant fan following, sold commercially very well, really high critic scores, you could get away with kind of doing less. It's not to say that that's the right way to go, but it is what it is. You could get away with doing less visual quality of life improvements because there's a bigger audience that's hungry for the game, Prince of Persia was a great game. I played it back on GameCube back in the day, and I loved it. But it's not exactly a giant IP with a lineage of successful hits that's relevant in today's society. So if Ubisoft wants to make it that, they got to knock this one out of the park. So take your time, do it justice, Make it pop and come back when you're ready and show us that difference, right? It's okay to delay a game. Look at Halo Infinite. That thing got a year delay, but definitely for the best. All right, finally today, we've got our Famitsu Sales. Thank you to Chris1964, whom I actually spoke with this morning regarding something else, but still, cool person. Over on the Install Base forums, you could go to installbaseforum.com and check these pages out for yourself. But in particular, I'm going to share the Famitsu software and hardware charts like I do every week. You could get this information, like I said, from Famitsu.com. Sometimes I've done that, but I really like this community. Chris puts a nice list together, so here we go. Let's see how we did in Japan for the last week. This is week 43, 2021, occupying October 18th through October 24th. At number 1 is the PS4 version of Demon Slayer with 15,996 copies sold. At 2 is the newly debuted Blue Reflection on PlayStation 4 with 14,048. At 3 is Ring Fit Adventure with 10,155. That saw an increase of 47%. Significant. At 4, hanging on with a small drop of 55%, is Metroid Dread for Nintendo Switch, which sold 9,999 physical copies. Again, this is physical only, not digital. It's kind of funny. One person really couldn't have just got him or herself up and said, I'm going to buy the game today and make it an even 10,000. But hey, very impressive nonetheless. At 5 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which is basically neck and neck with last week with 9,360 copies sold. At 6 is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with 8,695. At 7 is Blue Reflection Second Light on Nintendo Switch with 8,380. That's down by almost 6,000 copies of what its PlayStation 4 brother did. Now you could say, well, that was kind of Koei Tecmo's fault for not bringing out the first Blue Reflection on Nintendo Switch, so less of the user base had access to it, knew about it. More people knew about the game as a PlayStation title, so more people bought it on that system as a sequel. This goes to say that, sometimes even given a giant install base where Nintendo Switch dwarfs the PlayStation 4 in Japan, that not necessarily is it just a guaranteed system where it's going to sell more, especially on a smaller, more niche title like this. If it's a smaller title, if it already has a fan base on another system, if there is no original iteration, so this is a sequel, that some people will have played, but otherwise, I want to play it on the same platform that I already did because I didn't have access to the original on the larger selling system. You're going to have cases like this where, a PS4 version outsold it. Now there is a thing called legs. We'll see that maybe the Nintendo Switch version tapers off a little bit more gently each week. Maybe lifetime to date, we'll see Koei Tecmo say that actually the Nintendo Switch version outsold the PS4 version digitally, and then the Switch version is a little bit higher than PS4's. That's a little bit speculation talk, and I don't think is necessarily the case, but it is possible. But just because, a system has a giant install base doesn't guarantee it's going to sell better. If something comes out that's notable, of a notable IP, Grand Theft Auto, for instance, Grand Theft Auto, the trilogy, the definitive edition, I'll be very curious to see where does that sell best. We've got better graphics, performance on PS5, Xbox Series X, Nintendo Switch version. We have some gyro, some touchscreen. We got that, portable and home console nature appeal to it. You could even say that, some people might be tied to the brand from PlayStation days back on PS2. Maybe some people are tied to it on Xbox 360. Not a lot of Nintendo consoles have had a GTA. In fact, only DS really with Chinatown Wars. So, there are some arguments that make it maybe the Nintendo Switch version won't sell the best. But I'm curious, Okay, moving on. Number 8, Minecraft, the Nintendo Switch version, sold 8,306. At 9 is Animal Crossing, which had a good jump to 6,581, an 18% increase, probably thanks to that Happy Home Paradise DLC being announced. More people are like, okay, now the game is full. Now's my time to hop in. And at 10 is Pokemon Sword and Shield for the Nintendo Switch with 6,280 copies sold, also receiving an 18% bump. Pretty cool week sales-wise overall. I'm happy for Metroid Dread's small drop of only 55%. I expect digital to be a pretty high ratio for these last 2 weeks, as the game has been selling quite well, getting rid of its physical copies in Japan. And with the recently announced Metroid Dread demo, which, by the way, if you have not purchased Metroid Dread yet, now's your time to play the demo. The demo went live on the Nintendo Switch eShop last night. So what's your excuse? Play Metroid Dread. And then hopefully you liked the demo and buy it. And let's see these numbers go up next week and all across the world continue to do well, as the game at this point is likely north of 1 million. We see that the top 10 performance is 8 for Nintendo Switch, 2 for PlayStation 4. As we move into hardware, let's check it out. You will find that number 1 is Nintendo Switch with 108,122 units sold. PlayStation 5 at 2 with 14,280. Quite the gap there. Xbox Series at 3,889. PlayStation 4 at 462. And 3DS at 449. Nintendo Switch had a nice bump from last week. The Nintendo Switch OLED model in particular was pretty much sold out. What Nintendo shipped for the opening 3-day weekend worldwide virtually sold out. And there has been shipments on, each day more or less, each week for sure, as those weeks have come and gone, but not replenishing the stock to as quite high of a figure as they pumped out in that first 3-day weekend. You can see here the split OLED model at 61,169, regular Switch at 38,658, and the Nintendo Switch Lite at 8,295. If you look at the PS5, the digital was at 2754, physical reigned supreme at 11,526. On the Xbox side of things, a bit of a mismatch here. Xbox Series X only having 74 sales, massively undershipped. That's what that tells me. With Xbox Series S being at 3,815. You can see last week was also a bit of a mismatch, but this week, definitely. Overall, we're creeping up on the end of the year. Things are about to get really exciting. New Mario Party coming out, that Grand Theft Auto, the trilogy, the definitive edition on all 3 platforms, Shin Megami Tensei 5, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. It seems that Nintendo is definitely going to win Japan for the next 2.25 months. The rest of the world, I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo pulls it off as well, but part of that is, just how many shipments are there going to be of PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S? The OLED model, that's another thing. Can Nintendo pump out enough? You remember, they released about 1.95 million at launch of the Nintendo Switch Lite. If you line up the numbers of how quickly they reached that number with how many days it was on the market, 10 days, 1.95 million. You look at 3 days here, 600,000. It's about equal. It's about 200,000 a day. Now, Nintendo Switch Lite is, getting along a little bit ahead of OLED model, probably not because of market saturation or lack of interest in OLED, but more likely shipments. I think if Nintendo could ship enough, it's going to win the holidays, thanks to OLED and a pretty strong lineup. But if PlayStation could ship more, maybe they would be the ones that would reign supreme. If Xbox could make it up and ship more than PlayStation, maybe they would. Hard to say. It's exciting stuff. That's going to do it today for Video Game News with Gale Network. Thank you for watching. I had fun talking. Let me know what you thought about the topics today in the comment section below, and I hope to see you all next time. Have a good one. Bye.